you all to hear that.
Yes.
And know that.
However, I am on the licensing board. I just newly elected member of the licensing board. You won't get your license taken away for doing that. Oregon has, and this is one of those things that Mark was talking about, where I was asked to come in and be on an advisory panel when they were rewriting the rules for joint mobilization for Oregon. Specifically because there were several PTs who were very adamantly and very vocal that PTA should not do it. I was like, we do it all the time. So I was there to speak, to tell them I'm certified. I just took a 4-day written oral and practical exam. It's videotaped. It's archived somewhere. I can do it. What the licensing board decided as a result of some of these discussions was it's the PT's choice what they delegate to the PTA. And Oregon will very staunchly, the board and the licensing board they fall back on that. That's really the PT's prerogative. If you have a good relationship, they trust you, they've trained you in mobilizations, or you've taken an OPTA class, or you've gone and done a certification, it's the PT that's supervising you who is in charge of that patient's care. And the licensing is written that way. There is nowhere in the licensing Oregon's laws that say you can't do it. And that's the law. The APTA is not the law. They are the philosophical, this is the vision of what we want PT to be like. Now when we sat down and they wrote out the rules for that specific topic on joint mobilization, they got the APTA Guide to Physical Therapist Practice and referred to it line by line to make sure that what they were saying was in line with what the profession has deemed as good practice. So, is that really confusing, or does that kind of give you an example of some of the ways that what the association, the licensing board's a separate entity. They are the ones who are, actually the legislatures are the ones who write our Practice Act in Oregon, and they write the rules of what's my scope of practice.
I think the distinction is just great to hear that it all starts with a conversation with your supervising physical therapist. Mm-hmm. And it all starts with a relationship with your supervising physical therapist. And then it starts with holding yourself accountable to realize that this is an advanced clinical skill. Mm-hmm. And you take it seriously and you take additional classes so that you are safe and do no harm. But it really does all start with a relationship with your supervising physical therapist. Yeah. If you have a solid one there, then you can move forward.
And really, honestly, the PTs are awesome to work with. I've loved it. I've had some very close relationships with a lot of the PTs that I work with, which is why I've kind of gotten some training in certain areas, because I've been like, I want to be able to help her with that skill, or I don't want to have to go leave the room and get her to come in and do a certain technique that that she could teach me. So I was always like, can you show me that? Can you, and they would also, reciprocate and give me the training and then refer to certain classes. It'd be really good for you to take this class that the OPTA is having and stuff like that. So anyway, all that to say, I think that's one of the great benefits for the Oregon chapter of the Physical Therapy Association is we have a pretty strong dynamic, a lot of different not disciplines, but specialty areas represented on our continuing education committee. And that's one of the great things about being a member as well. I thought that that in order to be on a committee that worked on the workshops and set up the speakers and decided what topics would be interesting to have, that you had to be somehow invited, So really I didn't for years. I was just kind of like doing my job and stuff. And then I realized that, somebody came and asked me if I wanted to be on the continuing ed committee. And then once I got there, I was like, this is really fun. And I realized you're not to be invited. I mean, it's your association, and any interests that you have, whether it be, advocacy, there's a government affairs, there's membership committees, ethics committee. Are you on the ethics committee? Yeah. I should see that.
Memorize those standards.
Yeah.
Golden rule.
So, I love ethics. I took some ethics classes, bioethics, a couple years ago at Linfield, and I was like, I love that stuff, and especially when it's related to your patients. You run into over the years situations where you have to refer. As a matter of fact, I kind of told Mark this on the way down. I just pulled out the practice or the ethical standards from the APTA because I want to keep it in my desk, because sometimes facilities, especially a hospital or a bigger entity like a SNF or a nursing home, it's very uncomfortable if somebody you're working with them and they've met their goals, they've plateaued, they're not going to benefit anymore from doing more therapy, but the bookkeepers and the administrators are like, are you sure you can't keep them for another week? And that is a licensing, there's a licensing law about that. You can be fined for it. And there's also the ethics for the APTA very specifically says if the person is not going to be benefiting from your services, it's unethical to continue. And it's also unethical not to provide services to somebody because they don't have insurance, or this person has this insurance and so they get more than this one. So really it helps you really keep focused on the client in your day-to-day practice. And when you're asking yourself, their insurance, I'm only supposed to see them a half hour, but I really need to do this other thing, you do what they need, regardless of what, and sometimes I get to educate the administrator on that sometimes. So it's nice to say, see, I didn't make that up, so.
All of our clinical sites got a copy of that too.
Huh?
I said all of our clinical sites got a copy of that this summer. It's a brand new
Yeah.
PTA standard of ethics.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. And it really is the guiding, that's one thing I say about our profession is the therapists that I've worked with and the APTA, as much as we try to change things and be movers and shakers, but really very good focus on what's best for our patients, and that's always kind of at the center of the decisions, even if sometimes they don't always go the way you want to, or they don't change as fast as you would like them to. I feel really good about that. You always know that the client's the focus on there. So let me see if I cover, let me just real quickly on this first page where it says PTA caucus, I want to talk a little bit about just some current topics on PTAs specifically. And one of the things I want you to think about as an analogy is let's say we're all on a lake and we're in a boat, a rowboat, but we don't have any oars and we don't have a motorboat, and there's a storm coming. They come all the time. They come and go. Right now it's sunny, but there's a storm coming. So we could just sit there in the boat. Eventually we're going to end up somewhere on shore. This storm's going to come and it's going to push us around, and we're going to end up somewhere where we want to be. It may be on the other side of the lake where we don't want to be, or it may be in quicksand or something like that. So things are going to change. Things are going to happen and push our profession. Our profession is us in the boat. And things are going to push it. What the association does is it provides the therapist the opportunity to work together, either with rows, a motor, anything, whatever, to steer that boat where we want it to go, despite the fact that we've got waves coming and different things that pop up that are going to influence where our boat is going. But if everybody is working together on that, and I say that especially true for the PTAs, that we need to have a good number of people in our boat, and we need to all be kind of working together and doing the rowing or whatever, getting out and kicking our feet, paddling it to where it goes. Because if we don't do that and we just sit in the boat, someone else is going to push it for us, and it's going to end up maybe someplace that we don't necessarily like it to be. So some of the things, like I said, in general, I think the PTA profession has just really grown and advanced based on the needs in the clinic and what our PTs are needing us to do to help them. Here's some other current issues that we want to make sure that we're steering this boat for. One is the full boat. And quite frankly, I think the association's done a great job with the PTs voting, okay? It's not an issue of, I really don't like what you're doing, and so I want the vote so I can have that. For me, it's truly a democratic thing. We still would like to work on that. We can't bring it before the House of Delegates for 5 more years, so we'll still be working on that. That is just something that's just, we're just going to persevere and keep bringing it forward. This year, I didn't finish the talk about it, but when they talked about the vote, it was supposed to be a very contentious debate, and I was warned by several people, oh, be ready to hear, some really negative comments from some states, and, Oregon is pretty pro-PTA. It wasn't like that at all. It was very collegial, very respectful. 3/4 of the discussion was very much for us and how well respected we are as clinicians and for our skills. The percentage of people that really, there used to be all kinds of kind of silly arguments. Those weren't really brought up on the House floor. It's kind of like that had kind of died down, the emotional part, and it was much more the philosophical idea of the PTs are in charge of the clinical model, and they should also therefore be in charge of the association and where it's going. And so that was kind of the general kind of feel. It's just the kind of political side that the PTs feel. We are responsible for what our assistants are doing. We are responsible for, we're in charge of the clinical model. The governance of the association should be similar. So that passed, it passed the majority vote, which is we got 58% of the delegates to allow, say yes, it's a good idea to give us a full vote at chapter level. But we needed 66% in order to change a bylaw, and so it did not pass. But it's still, you have to look at the small changes that kind of build up from 5 years ago when people were just kind of really, nitpicking. Now it was very collegial. We understand your point, our point is, and people voted on it, and it was a majority. So, we just kind of things are changing. I think it's slower there. Some of the other things here are, we want to create what our role is in Vision 2020. So one of the things that PTA Caucus asked a few years ago was they actually asked for a mega issue discussion with the board. Did you guys ever hear about that? They wanted to know basically where are we in Vision 2020? I mean, what's our education level? What's our, and the board of directors, they had a discussion, and they pretty much came out with, we think you're good right where you're at. And the PTA Caucus is like, we don't agree. So we had this big brainstorming thing at the House of Delegates, which was really fun. We put up things and just like throwing out biggest dreams, where do we want to be, what do we see us doing. So that's something that we're working on, kind of a document in process. Part of that, we talked about educational level. For entry-level PTA, does it need to go from an associate degree to a bachelor degree eventually? Or something similar to nursing where they have an associate to a BSN. I think you have to do it in a couple years after you graduate. You have to have a bachelor's. Advocate for full reimbursement for PTA services. And this is like, as of today, like a new hot topic. And I'm going to share an article with Mark, but there are some payers, some insurers nationally who are denying service or payment for services provided by PTA, or they're going to only pay at 50%. And I'll share the article. I'll give the article to Mark. Did you guys see that one? Christine, have you seen that?
Well, I just have clinical experience of being a clinical owner that happens. I mean, there's certain carriers that we don't assign more PTAs to work with those patients because we don't get paid.
Yeah, or is that still happening in Oregon?
TRICARE is one in particular, Medicare intermediary to TRICARE.
Yeah, they used to do that. They're still doing that down here, because in Portland they aren't. Anyway, so these are the kind of discussions we have. We're talking on the PTA listserv.